What is up, YouTube? JR Juggernaut 1 is back, and today's vid is going to be, or I should say this evening's vid, is going to be part 2 of my Prelude to YCS Atlanta series. This is going to be part 2, which I'm going to call the decks that won't cut it. This is sort of my way of talking about a few decks that I think aren't necessarily bad and aren't like, worth playing. I just think I'm just giving my opinion as to why I think they're ultimately not going to be able to keep up with the current format with windups and insectors, being played, and just kind of explain why they're not going to be good deck choices for YCS Atlanta. Mind you, this is sort of controversial on my part, as you can see on from these cards. You could probably tell what decks I'm going to talk about, but hear me out here and let me explain why I selected these decks to talk about. There are others I could talk about, but I decided to stick with the decks that have some sort of popularity. First, we're going to start with Dark World. Now, Dark World is a deck that we kind of all know what's annoying about it. The deck is annoyingly luck-based, because the real dependence on the deck is your ability to draw out your draw engines. Straightforward. There's not that part of it is good. Now, my friends, a bunch of my friends who are members of a team called Team Strong Island, a lot of them run their own version of Dark World. They just call it Dark World Turbo. It's pretty similar to what Brendan Wigley ran at YCS Columbus, and he proceeded to go 8-0 before being DQ'd for stupid reasons. It's complicated. The reason I think the deck is one of the better versions to run of Dark World is because the deck is very fast, and it maximizes on draw power to the point where you're most likely going to get to your draw engines relatively quickly. It won't always work, but it has some pretty nasty aspects to it. Now, the reason though why I don't think it's going to cut it here is don't think it's going to be fast enough, because of the fact that a lot of the draw power relies on you having at least one turn to set up, and even if you're able to get a plus off of the cards, Dark World is just not a deck that can build up momentum quickly enough, at least as quickly as windups or insectors. Definitely the bigger problem for this deck, though, is windups, simply for the fact that most Dark World decks don't run Max C or Effect Failure for hand traps. I mean, makes sense, but that definitely holds the deck back for that reason. Because obviously hand traps are going to be very important now against both of these decks. However, I think I also see the problem, I also see and then against insectors, I see a problem where this deck, they can plus off of, some of their cards, their face downs are chainable, but the fact is a good insector player will be smart and just do their best to keep your field spell off. And that's just going to be very problematic for you. On one hand, they can't remove Grapha from the equation very easily, but they don't really need to. Simply put. I just think out of all these Dark Worlds, it's just probably going to have the most difficulty keeping up with these decks. If windups go first turn loop, they're screwed. Next, let's talk about plants. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, because a lot of people are going to still try and run Tour Guide Tengu plants, or synchrocentric, whatever you want to call it. They're going to still try to run it. Personally, I just think plants are not going to be able to, I would not play plants under these circumstances. On one hand, plants are a very powerful explosive deck, which means they can, and because of their use of the graveyard, depending on the circumstances, they can bounce back from both of these decks. However, here's my issue with the deck still, and this is just coming from experience. The problem I have is the fact that, and one thing I forgot to mention about Dark World, the reason it's not good against, the reason why logically it should be good against in wind-ups, but wind-up Hunter doesn't discard its Sends to the Grave, so yeah, their effects won't activate. But yeah, going back to plants, on one and plants are explosive, but here's my major issue with it. It's the fact that they don't have a lot of cards that actually are effective against these matchups. Thunder King is really good against Insectors, I'm sorry, against wind-ups, but it doesn't stop the first turn loop, and even if they're running triple Maxi, double Veiler, triple Fiendish Chain, or double Fiendish Chain, they're still not running a ton of cards like that can really, stop them turn one. I think in spite of the deck's versatility, I just don't think it has. I think the problem is it's gonna have trouble making comebacks against some of these decks, even if they're able to, even if they're able to stop their, the loop or something like that. I just think it can be a real challenge for them. But this deck probably has the best chances out of all the decks that are shown here, just because, again, a greater variety of plays can be very important to them. They can be, they can just it can be very beneficial for that reason. Not really a whole lot to say. It's plants. They're good, but like, the reason again I played Agents over plants was because Agents didn't have as many plays they could make, but the deck was more explosive and had a greater amount of boss monsters to deal with my opponent's big monsters. Plants have more plays they can make, but they don't always have a whole lot of plays, a whole lot of options if they're looking to make a specific type of play. So keep that in mind. And now, as I said, now we're obviously moving on to Agents. You guys know I love this deck. I was a big fan of TG Agents up until recently, for like 2 months. But obviously I'm not playing the deck anymore, as I've mentioned in previous vids. My issue with Agents, and the reason they're not going to be doing well, is, well, for a few. Number one, they can't utilize any of the good side decking cards that really work against this deck, which is really unfortunate. Number two, or maybe they can, but I don't, like, the big ones I'm thinking of, they can't really utilize, which is really unfortunate. Number two, I just think the deck is too, like, the problem is, the deck won't, can make some big plays, but usually takes a turn or two to really get it going, and they can't really make huge pushes within the first 1 or 2 turns, so I think that really holds the deck back for that reason. If I was playing the deck, though, now, I would definitely play Veilers over Heralds, just because of both of these decks, and the fact that I'd want to be able to use, both of these, I'd want to be able to stop both of these decks, if it comes down to it. But yeah, really, the deck just, it's not going to work as well. When you're in this type of format, it's too easy for each, like, these decks are just pains in the asses in themselves. Against windups, if you don't draw the Max C or Veiler, you're screwed, just like with plants. And Insectors, they have a more annoying matchup because, well, they're not, their lack of back row. I think what I'm trying to say is that because of Agents don't play a ton of back row, I think that really hurts them in the end. I think you're gonna need back row so you can stop your opponent's plays, and you can't do that without Agents, really, if you want to run a very fast, consistent build, at least from my perspective. But hey, some people could prove me wrong. We'll see what happens. Either way, I wouldn't feel confident running this deck at YCS Atlanta. And then the last deck I'm going to talk about is Ninjas. Now, Ninjas are obviously a new deck, and I've made it clear I didn't mention this, but I was testing this deck out for a little while. I ultimately stopped playing it, though, for a few reasons. Number one, I wasn't finding it to be that consistent in certain areas. I thought, like, I liked the way I liked, I found it consistent when I drew certain cards, but, like, when I didn't draw them, that was annoying. And then there was also, but I think the real problem I had was just the fact that I was sick of the fact that this deck gets nailed so hard by both Veiler and Max C. And Yeah, that could be really problem. More so Valor than Max C, but the fact is both cards are very effective against this deck, so I didn't like that much at all. Uh, the Ninjutsu Art of Super Transformation is very good, but it doesn't, and and obviously it's a great card to use against both decks, but you have to time it correctly, and that won't always be so simple. I mean, at least against windups. Against Insectors, this card's really good because if you just activate it immediately when they try to activate their Insector effect. So that's really good. Ninjas are powerful. They're fairly aggressive, and they have and they will play a fair amount of back row. That part of it's great. I'm just not sure how consistent I think the deck is, and if it's not that consistent, I don't think it'll be very effective. Common sense. More testing will need to be done, and I can easily be proven wrong on this, but this is just what I'm seeing from it right now. If there were any other, there aren't a ton of other decks. Honestly, I'll probably be talking about more decks that I think you should use with at YCS Atlanta, because there's actually a bunch that I have in mind, but I'll save that for another video. Anyway, I'm just gonna kind of end it off here. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Yeah, I guess just tell me what you guys think about all these decks and how they'll fare in this meta. I can see these decks being successful. In my opinion, I don't think they're going to be. I don't think they're going to make the impact they've all been, with the exception of Ninjas, they've been making so far. So that being said, I'm out of here, guys, and peace.